Very odd feeling this morning. A very weird and peculiar feeling. To wake up and not see Arsenal at the top of the table is very weird indeed. I mean, it's been an incredibly impressive 6-month run from them, hasn't it? They have been borderline exceptional and as near to perfect as you can possibly be. To hit 50 points at the halfway point of the season, to be on course to become Centurions is truly exceptional from them. But they are now the hunters rather than the hunted. And how they go from here, how they pick themselves up off the back of what happened last night is going to be key. They're going to have to find a way to respond immediately. Unai Emery up next. They have to get it right. They have to hit the ground running at Villa Park. Otherwise, Manchester City will be out of sight in a flash. Arsenal can still do this. I truly believe that Arsenal are capable of doing it. But there is something symbolic that happened last night. Manchester City are top of the league. It's symbolic. It doesn't really change too much from an Arsenal perspective. If Arsenal win all their games from now to the end of the season, they will almost definitely win the league. But there is something symbolic about Manchester City going top of the league, doing it at the Emirates and doing it in the nature that they did. They deserved it. Overall, they deserved it. Don't get me wrong. Arsenal were excellent. And in that first half in particular, I thought they shone. But they just couldn't keep it up. Their squad isn't strong enough. The bench isn't strong enough. And after the second half, I thought City took control. And from that point, they were dominant. It was a statement result from Pep Guardiola. It really was. And ultimately, what it came down to is individual errors. Certain players not being good enough, certain players not being switched on enough. And Arsenal did so well. They held their own for so long. They went a goal down. Saka got them back into the game. They created chances. Nketiah should have scored at least twice. And then it's just errors. Tomiyasu and Gabriel both gifted possession for City for their first 2 goals. And City are ruthless. Like Kevin De Bruyne's finish. That man is just exceptional, isn't he? Like truly exceptional. There are very few footballers in the world that would have the vision, the ability and the skill and precision to launch the ball over the keeper's head with their first touch on their weaker foot. Truly, truly brilliant. And Manchester City are class. No two ways about it. And even when Arsenal were 8 points clear, the City threat was there. The City threat was obvious. You know, I thought Arsenal were going to win the league. And on some level, by the way, I still do. But the mentality of this City team, they are winners. They are proven winners. And it really is significant at this stage of the season. We are moving into the business end of the season. And the fact that they're winners and they know how to win is really, really important. Because not only do they have the mentality, but they also have the talent. Like, look at City's goal scorers, by the way. Yesterday, 200 million quid. 200 million quid that the goal scorers cost. I mean, that is outrageous. And then you've got Haaland, who scored his 32nd goal. We're in mid-February. We're in mid-February in a season that was interrupted by a World Cup. And the geezer has 32 goals already. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. It really is. It's utterly ridiculous. And Jack Grealish, look at the talent of the man. You know, I've backed Grealish from day dot. I like him. I really do. And everything that people don't like about him is a lot of the things that I do like about him. I find him relatable. I find him likeable. I also think that he is a dazzling footballer. And when people were saying waste of money, I just didn't empathise with it at all. I always knew that the talent was there. I always knew from the day that he kept Aston Villa up. Remember the goal he scored at Old Trafford? He was always going to be this player. And he was a Rizzler paper away from having a definitive moment last season. Remember, at the Bernabeu, it's a Rizzler paper. And he's had the moment that I think he has been waiting for. Scored at Old Trafford and now has done it again. And his goal was decisive. Obviously, a third goal was scored. But his goal really did feel decisive. And yet again, he's showing the player that he can become under Guardiola. It's poetry in motion. You know when Bernardo Silva's playing as well? How filthy is Bernardo Silva, by the way? How filthy. I didn't know that he had that edge to his game, which, you know, I appreciate the dark arts of the game. But Bernardo, he should have been booked probably about 3 challenges before he did actually get booked. I mean, it was as if his tactic when he was at left back was to stop Saka by hook or by crook. Whatever you got to do. Whatever you have to do to stop him, you stop him. But when Bernardo Silva is not being a little fouler, when he's not doing that and he's like knocking the ball about, when he ended up on the right, when he's stroking the ball around and Grealish is stroking the ball around and De Bruyne is stroking the ball around, it really is poetry in motion. And we have to also remember that their talents are all accentuated by Pep Guardiola. I mean, Pep Guardiola, he has reshaped the game to a level that I don't think anyone else has. People will always say, about Arsene Wenger doing, and of course Arsene Wenger did. But this Guardiola style and system and belief and approach, it's just mesmerising. He is so good, and he really does have the beating of Mikel Arteta. That's not to denigrate Arteta at all, by the way. But he really does have the beating of him. He's won 8 out of the 9 times that they have clashed. 8 out of 9, he's won. Guardiola has beaten Arteta 8 out of 9 times. And like I say, that isn't me denigrating Arteta at all. When you think about where Arsenal are, I mean, it's actually amazing where they are. It's amazing because they are still capable of winning the league. But something needs to change, and it needs to change now. Because I think what may have been happening, and maybe I've been guilty of this, I think we've all possibly been a little bit too generous on the occasions where Arsenal have dropped points. So we've always found a reason. And in fact, there has always been a reason. But sometimes, and I'm at this point with Chelsea now, I don't care. Win the game. I don't care. There are no outside factors. Win the game. So when Arsenal go to Villa, nothing matters. It's not about project. It's not about possession. It's not about style of play. It's not about progression. It's not about seeing something for the future. It's not about how well you... It's about winning the game. It's about winning the game. Because on various occasions, every time that Arsenal have dropped points, we've found reasons and excuses. For example, Newcastle. Well, Newcastle, they were travelling there. They were doing really well at the time. They were high up the table, and they don't concede goals. So a 0-0 at home to Newcastle is okay in the circumstances. And I was certainly saying that. But it's cumulative. Because then what comes next? Everton. Why did they lose at Goodison Park? Well, they lost because it wasn't Frank Lampard, and they lost because it was National Sean Dyche Day, and nobody wants to go to Everton for the first occasion of Sean Dyche. Nobody wants to play them when it's going to be a baptism of fire, and we explained that one. So we explained Newcastle. Newcastle didn't concede. We explained Goodison Park, Sean Dyche. We explained Brentford. Brentford hasn't lost since 1992, or whatever it is. And, Brentford are a very good team, and they don't lose games, and Ivan Toney's a thorn in anyone's side. And we found reason after reason after reason. Not anymore. Arteta, simply find a way. Beat Emery. And that won't be easy because Emery's a class manager who will have a point to prove against Arsenal. And he's actually a man who, as Villarreal manager, knocked Arsenal out of the semi-final, didn't he? In fact, he beat Arteta. So he's really going to be up for this. But Arsenal have lots of reasons to be positive. They are level on points with the champions, with a game in hand, after 22 games played. It's a huge achievement. It really is a huge achievement. And trusting the process and always believing in the mantra is what it's been under Arteta. So there's no reason to panic now. They're building. There's progress being made. They still need to strengthen. I think that is the obvious thing that I took from yesterday. They desperately need to strengthen because just glancing at their bench tells you that they need to strengthen. I thought Gabriel looked knackered, and maybe he could have done without starting against Brentford the other day. He looked exhausted. I mean, he had his work cut out yesterday as well, but he really did look exhausted. But you never know. You do never know. There's just some belief in this City team that's going to take something special from Arsenal. Remember, Arsenal haven't won the league for 19 years. Man City haven't won the league for 9 months. So there is a belief, and you could see it in the players. The way that Kyle Walker approached the game, the way that he played, he's such a fighter, isn't he? He wouldn't let Martinelli have a moment. Not at one point did Martinelli get any change. Not at one point did Martinelli threaten. Not at one point was he able to stretch his legs because Kyle Walker was on it, fighting, hounding, doing everything that he possibly could to stop Martinelli. He wants to keep a grip of his Premier League title, Kyle Walker. You can clearly see that. But he wasn't the only one. Rodri, some of the tackles from Rodri. I think Xhaka was going to score, wasn't he? And Rodri slid in. Brilliant challenge. Bernardo Silva, I've spoken about. Filth. But filth in a good way. Do you know what I mean? Like filth in a good way. Ricardo Carvalho levels of filth, which is a beautiful sight to behold. You need that. You need that cynical, nasty, but desperately effective side to your game. And look, the way that City approached the game at times was ugly. I think Pep Guardiola probably said, stop Saka however you have to. Make sure that Saka has no change out of you. And you've got to do that. And with winners in the team, Ruben Diaz, do you know what? It's going to be so tough now. The City fans, though, you could hear them singing at their top of the league, and you could also hear them singing when they scored the second. That's why we're champions. And there is something very true in that. However, Arsenal have been dazzling. They have been mesmerising. They have been unplayable, and they have been historic this season so far. Nothing is set in stone. Nothing is won. But we have seen enough to believe that this Arsenal team are capable of going on a run now. And we have also seen enough for us to conclude that this Manchester City team have an element of vulnerability. A lot of twists and turns to come is my prediction. Thank you. I've enjoyed this, man. It's been very relaxed. It's a nice way to start the day. I watched the game this morning and thought I'd come and have a chat to you about it. Would love to hear your thoughts on the points I've raised. As always, I am honoured that you've watched this video. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please click the subscribe button if you haven't yet, if you're new around here. And I look forward to seeing you a bit later. Cheers.